Welcome to this week's episode of Courageous Leaders Changing the World. Super excited for this week's guest, Krista Tier. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, brother.
So the name of the podcast is Courageous Leaders Changing the World. What's the time in your life where you've had to summon more courage than any other time?
So many times. It's literally been my journey. But I feel like one pinnacle moment in particular was many years ago before I was sort of in the coaching space. I owned health cafes, and they were in the centre of Brisbane, and there was a huge storm that went through Brisbane and everything got sort of damaged. There was like significant amounts of hail, and the business that we had was on Queen Street. It was it was bottom story of a big high-rise building, and the roof collapsed. And all of the power boards got damaged. There was an Energex substation in the basement of our building, and although our shop wasn't damaged per se, we couldn't get power to it. And it was this moment in time where I was like, oh my God, like literally everything. There's all of these expenses going out every month. Everything can collapse right now. So I feel like I had this opportunity to, I guess, give in to my circumstances and just take things for the way that they were. Or obviously, as you know, entrepreneurship dictates and I guess gives us the opportunity, we can become really courageous and innovative. And instead of allowing those circumstances to determine my actions moving forward, I sort of used it as this opportunity to innovate and courageously move in a different direction. And what we chose to do instead was add like a whole catering section to our business. And so we went out there and, you know, I had to go into these, you know, big business houses. We had Deloitte and Flight Centre and Westpac and Boeing, and we ended up setting up this huge catering sector to our business that literally was not only replacing the income that we were in loss of, but it in fact doubled. And so then, you know, when our business was able to operate again, we had triple the amount of income that was coming in. And I really put that down to the courage to look outside of the box. Like that's ultimately what it was, because I believe that's the bravest move that we can make. So, yeah, I feel like that was one of the many that I've had to face in my business journey.
Yeah. Cool. How important then becomes innovation for that? Like, because, you know, we have so many of those times where we can either be crushed by our circumstances or we can basically crush our circumstances by actually just innovating and creating something new. How important does innovation become in that then?
Oh, wildly. I believe that is like literally the foundation of success. I even spoke about this on social media this morning. It's like so many of us want to create more attention and interaction and conversion, you know, from our social media or, you know, within our business. And yet we're trying to do it in the same way that everyone else does it. Like ultimately, if we look at the most successful, globally renowned brands in the world, they haven't done it in the same way that everyone else has done it. They've really blazed their own trail and they've done something different. So yeah, I believe it's like the basic foundation of any business to be built upon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does one start to do that, to be able to blaze their own trail then?
I really feel like you need to know yourself. Yeah. You know, like ultimately that's what it comes down to. When I first stepped into the coaching industry, it was sort of before like coaching was a thing. And all I really knew, and I didn't know myself to the extent that I know myself now, but the part of myself that I did know was that I wanted to contribute and make a difference. And I didn't have this like benchmark of, you know, how to set up a coaching business or how to get clients into a coaching business. It was really just following this authentic desire that I had, and then the rest kind of unfolded really innately and organically. But I believe that firstly we have to know who we authentically are and what we really deeply desire to be in the world and I guess the legacy that we want to leave behind. But then secondly, I feel like what takes us away from that is buying into the noise. You know, like there's so much noise everywhere in the world, but particularly online. You know, and it's so easy for us to be taken away from our unique gifts and passions and authentic nature and self when we are just constantly in consumption, you know, consuming what everyone else does in our industry, because whether we're conscious of it or not, it's playing a role in what we're producing and what we're bringing forward, and then in turn impacting our innovation. something that I did a long time ago was I literally just unfollowed everyone in my industry because I was like, I feel like that noise is just taking me away from what my heart really wants to produce and what my heart really wants to bring to the world. And it made just such an exponential change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
What's the thing that your heart is most yearning to bring to the world at the moment then?
I go through phases, but the further I progress,
I know what that means. I'm the same.
It's like, what's on the calendar today? I don't know. I feel like the major theme with what I've really been, I traversed it a little while ago, and I feel like, what I bring to the world is as a result of kind of what I've journeyed through. And, what I really recognized was, for a major part of, like, I've been in business for 19 years, and most of my success, probably up until the last 4 years, was based in a very masculine approach to business and lots of hustle and lots of grind. And I've always, worn work ethic like a badge of honor. Like, I can get in and get the job done. I can do the 60-hour weeks, whatever it takes. And ultimately, that led me to so many moments of exhaustion and burnout and feeling empty. And I was really allowing this belief of we have to sacrifice in order to make money, in order to create the business, in order to create the success. There has to be a form of sacrifice. And while, that's very nuanced, while in some circumstances that does have to be the case in different seasons, what I've really prioritized over the last 4 years is building a business and creating wild levels of wealth while still encompassing everything else that's important to me in my life. Really not only creating like the external richness, but also simultaneously creating the internal, like really being able to, when I'm with my kids, be ultimately present with them. When I am on a holiday, being ultimately present with my partner and, the experience of that holiday. When I lay my head down at nighttime, being able to rest peacefully, instead of having like a million ideas, running through my mind. Even when I am in my business, being able to do so with like a really calm sense of peace in my nervous system. So I guess what's really on my heart at the moment is teaching women that have created success in a very masculine way to do it in a different way, to do it without the sacrifice, without the burnout, and ultimately creates richness as more of a holistic approach rather than just a bank balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are the key areas that you notice most people falling back into that kind of masculine paradigm?
I feel like, it's very unique, dependent on the person. I know for myself, and I'll speak from my own personal experience, there was a lot of my business that was created from a deep lack of worth. It was, I have to have this in order to be enough in the world. I have to have the money or the car or the accolades or the title or the personal brand or the recognition in order to be enough in the world. And so there was just this constant pain cycle of, me being on this hamster wheel of never enough, and of course that's going to equate in burnout. I do feel like that is a real theme for a lot of entrepreneurs, not just women, even for men. I've experienced a lot of men that have created wild levels of success, and it has been from like this real lack place, in attempts to fill this void within them. So I feel like that's one major factor. I feel like there's, a lot of us use, and this was me as well, we use business and busyness as an avoidance strategy. It's like our way of running away from really sitting with ourselves and being with ourselves and being with our heart and being with our genuine desires. And that was a lot of my journey. Like, it was so easy for me to be busy. It was so easy for me to do the thing, but to sit in silence, to sit rested and peaceful, that was my stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the most overachievers really struggle to actually go beyond the work ethic and, develop that rest ethic is what I like to talk about. It's like, how do you actually start to create this capacity to actually be with yourself to the same degree that you actually work so that you can actually expand that? Because,
so true.
We fall into that that paradigm of like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep doing more, all to avoid actually just being with myself, and all to avoid actually integrating all the things that are coming up as we start to go through, all the things that come up in business, because we're going to go through many of those layers of, feeling not enough, feeling unworthy at each level. It's going to start to come up, and we continue to journey that. And, when we can start to create that shift internally, then everything starts to open up for us.
Absolutely.
And that I think it was Chris Williamson's, he came over and was speaking in Australia, and he's talking about, most people who are, type A personalities, work ethic is not the problem. It's like there's a group of people where work ethic is the problem, but then the other group of people is like work ethic, that's the real issue. It's like they've got the work ethic, but that's what's actually sabotaging themselves. So it's understanding that different people are in different places and applying what is going to support them the most to be able to level up.
That's right. That's where there's nuances too, like I spoke to something similar. It's like there's two ends of the spectrum, and you've got to assess where the person's at. So I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. What's been your journey with stepping into that deeper level of ownership of your worth?
Oh, I think there's been layers to it. One real, moment of monumental transformation and change that I didn't necessarily consciously choose was when I've been in business since I was 18. So, I had this huge identity around being a young entrepreneur. And I created success from a very young age. I was 18 running a multi-six-figure business, which was a lot back then, And then I stepped into owning, 3 more businesses all at once. And once again, it was like this badge of honor that I didn't realize I was wearing until I sold all of them. Once I sold all of my businesses, I stepped into this like white space of, holy shit, who am I? Like without this entrepreneurial title, without the title of successful, without this business owner identity that I've created, who on earth am I? And it was like a real death for me in a way. But I feel like there's been multiple layers of that, I feel like I've been catalyzed into really deepening into my own worth through, being in unhealthy relationships and, being faced with pain that I didn't really ask for. However, I did in in another way. It's like, well, I kind of did ask for it. It just didn't appear in the way that I wanted it to. Yeah. So it was never something that I guess I've always set the intention to, work on a facet of my life, whether it be, developing more worth or uncovering a deeper part of myself or loving myself to a deeper level. But there was never like a conscious journey that I followed. It's more I just allowed it to unfold with my external circumstances, because ultimately I believe that. Like I believe that life is, we can intend to create some level of transformation in our life, and then life will show us, like life will bring into our law of attraction everything that we require in order to get that thing. However, oftentimes what we do is we're like, I don't want that. Like I'm just going to put up my boundaries and I'm going to avoid it and I'm going to push it away because that's not what I asked for. Whereas I feel like my whole journey has just been welcoming everything as a gift. It's like, okay, this is a part of that journey that I asked for. And although I don't really like it right now and I want to avoid it and I want to push it away, I'm just going to feel what's present for me, because this is a layer that I sort of need to journey through in order for me to deepen in the aspect that I've asked to deepen in. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I talk about it in terms of the seasons and the areas of initiation. A lot of people want to be initiated in business. It's like, this is my season of business. And it's like all your family shit's coming straight at you and it's all coming up in that direction. It's the season of family initiation. And the irony is, when you actually just be with whatever the season of initiation is, then it actually alchemizes all areas of life, because life's just going to keep serving those things up to you. It's going to keep going, all right, here's all your shit in your relationship. Here's all your shit with your parents. Here's all your shit in business. So people who are, ultra achievers and actually get fulfillment in that holistic way, they're the people who do exactly what you do, which is, you just flow with where it's coming up and actually just flow with that rather than trying to change it to all of these other areas of life.
Yeah, and control it. Or get into overachiever mode and keep taking action and forcing, which is what I used to do, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just interesting to see how, when we are in that season of alchemizing something from like a family or relational perspective, how the threads are just so intertwined in our business anyway. So ultimately we're still getting what we're asking for. It's just not in the way that we anticipated it, right? It's like our mind wants to understand this like linear pathway towards what it is that we want. And it's like all of these other curveballs that get thrown. That is the path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What's been your journey then with control?
So big in the past. My ability to surrender was nil. My ability to trust was nil. And I feel like there have been seasons of my life, particularly over, not so much in the last, year, but the 3 years prior to that, where I was forced, like literally forced into surrender and trust. That was my only option. And because I was so unwilling to let go of control, like I was white-knuckled grip in every area of my life. And ultimately I was just terrified. But then when life dealt some crazy circumstances, I had to let go. Like literally in order to survive, I had to let go and I had to trust. And I had to soften and I had to surrender. And yeah, ultimately I'm grateful. Like, I don't know whether I would have done it any other way, And I believe that life is, I'm sure there were plenty of opportunities, like the feather, the brick and the truck analogy. There were plenty of opportunities where I received the feather of like, hey, you can let go. Yeah, like you can release the grip, but I chose not to take those. So it took the truck coming through and, demolishing everything that I was trying to control in order for me to ultimately know, surrender and trust in the way that I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I see how it plays out with the feather and the truck analogy. It like plays out all the time. And I was on one of the calls with one of my coaches recently, and he was talking about, it plays out mentally first. You just start to think about it, and then it starts to play out physically. So you physiologically start to notice how it plays out. You get sensations in your body that you just start to ignore, and then it starts to show up socially, and then it starts to show up based on like getting reflections back from clients and all of these things. And, our relationship with control is really one of the core mechanisms that we utilize when we're not being courageous, when we're not actually facing off with the thing, when we're actually being led by fear, when we're in that fear level of consciousness, which is keeping us stuck in that low level of frequency, that reactivity, which is just perpetuating that entire pattern. And the more that we can actually open up to the facing of the thing, the courage required in that, the more that it opens up for us in every area of life. So our relationship with journeying that control mechanism is one of the deep ones, especially for overachievers as well. So
yeah, I really feel that. Yeah. And I feel that plays out, like I witness it within a lot of my clients, and I can really, as just in relation to what you said, it's like the control is there when we are avoiding the thing that needs to be done. But the moment we face the thing that needs to be done, there is, because it's like we're in unknown territory. So our only option is surrender, and trust. So I can really feel that. I love that. Yeah.
What's been the thing that you've had to, surrender into and trust into recently?
I feel like it's daily. I feel like a part of it in relationships, I've been with my partner now for 7 or 8 months. And, in the past I was in relationship dynamics where there wasn't really the ability to trust or surrender. And being in this new dynamic, and, we've known each other for 22 years. We've got like a really long-standing relationship, and we were best friends as teenagers. So it's been really interesting to witness all of the parts of my experience in previous relationships. Like I thought I've done so much work, I went 2.5 years, like not even, just choosing not to even speak to anyone, completely celibate, just to really work on myself. I knew I needed to heal. And I was like, great, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back in. And, being faced with a relationship that is so safe and so supportive and so loving and so unconditional, it was, it surfaced the remnants of everything else that needed to be worked on, the things that I wasn't able to deal with on my own, but were only going to be dealt with, entering back into another relationship. So I definitely, that has been not so much now, particularly in the early stages of the relationship. It was a huge test of my surrender and my trust, and really eliminating all of the areas where I wasn't willing to trust, because that's been so unsafe in the context of relationships in the past. So I feel like that is probably the most evident in recent times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you find that dance between, going through the season of celibacy, so it's like all internal work, and then, there's certain things that you can't face on your own. How do you determine when that point is to be able to recognize, you've completed the work on yourself internally, and now you need to go and bring it into a relationship, or you need to bring it into business, you need to bring it to something external, because a lot of people will fall back into just, I'm just doing my internal work. They disconnect from the world. They, buy the van, go become a hippie and disconnect from the entire world.
Yeah.
And how do we discern when that is and when that's actually just become a coping mechanism?
Yeah. So for me, and I think that it's so nuanced, and everyone requires something different. My partner's an example of that. He just went through a separation, and we were together in, a very short space of time after that separation. And your mind wants to, make meaning and story of what's right and what's wrong, but I believe that everyone's just so different. For me personally, it was not something that I was trying to understand through my mind. It was definitely feeling, like my intuition and my intuitive abilities are so powerful, and it's something that I haven't necessarily trusted in the past. And that was for a multitude of reasons, relationships being one of those reasons. But for me, I was really able to see that most of my adult life has been in relationship. I was with my ex-husband when I was 17 years old. I was married by the time I was 21. We were together for 11 years. I became a mum at 22. And then, shortly out the back of that relationship, there was another relationship, and so I saw that a lot of my journey was in relationship. And yeah, it wasn't something that I necessarily consciously chose. I mean, my circumstances were different as well. I went through a separation with a 3-week-old baby. So I was not only going through the grief and the betrayal of a relationship breakdown, but I was also going through a huge initiation, becoming a mother for the second time. And, when you become a mother, particularly, after the enormity that childbirth is, there's like this deep desire. And I've always, previously I was like the independent woman who could do anything on her own, and it's the one stage for the independent woman that you so deeply desired to be held and supported and nourished and nurtured. And I didn't have that, I had to do that for myself. And so I think my circumstances were a little bit unusual as well, but it was a felt sense. Like there was a part of me that couldn't think of anything worse than being in a relationship with the turmoil that I was feeling on the inside. And although that would have been a great avoidance strategy, to sort of mask what I was feeling, to run away from what I was feeling, I just knew that I had to sit with myself. And there was also the awareness and the consideration for another person coming into my life. And I didn't want them to, be a result of my projection and my wounds and my unhealed stuff. So I think that we've really got to consider, of course, the feelings that we feel, but sometimes our trauma can actually feel more comfortable, I'd like to think that I'm radically honest with myself. Like I'm not someone that has the tendency to bypass or avoid. Like I'm willing to have deep self-inquiry and to really acknowledge the truth that is existing within me. And so therefore I could really trust myself in that decision. It wasn't, oh no, the avoidance strategy would be entering out and getting back into a relationship based on what I can see has occurred in my past. So I think there's the component of, trusting ourselves and our feelings in that, but also combined with like historically, looking at ourselves historically. But in order to look at those things, we ultimately have to have a relationship with ourselves that is so based in truth, and radical responsibility to an extent,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the common things that you keep kind of coming back to is trust. How does someone develop more self-trust?
This was honestly something that was one of my biggest hurdles, and I attracted a multitude of relationships that really highlighted this for me. I relied on everything outside of me to develop a level of trust in a higher power, or everything in my external world was showing me that I had zero trust within myself. So I can really relate to this. And the journey that I've gone on was really starting with micro moments, because particularly exiting, relationships that I've had in the past, my ability to trust myself and have any form of discernment or certainty was completely obliterated. And so I had to create new foundations of that. And it started with the micro, instead of, calling my mum and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or, relying on a mentor or relying on a coach or speaking to a friend. I would actually just start in those micro moments of like, okay, what do I want to eat? Okay, I'm just going to trust myself in that. What move do I want to make? Okay, I'm just going to trust myself in that, and just allowing myself to be in the experience of the feedback system that was as a result of me just following my internal compass. So I really believe that we just have to start micro. The expectation that we're just going to be able to wake up one day and trust ourselves is really unrealistic. We've got to build that relationship like moment by moment, in the micro moments in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What have you journeyed with that opposite side of trust then, that like the betrayal wound that plays out underneath that? So like when we don't trust ourselves, we betray ourselves. So what's been your journey on the other end of that spectrum then of all the betrayals in life?
Oh, wow. There's been so much. Betrayal and abandonment in particular. And brings up discomfort, clearly. What I really recognized, was I have, particularly in relationship, I have been through multiple relationships where there has been abandonment and betrayal. And it got to a point where it was so glaringly obvious that I couldn't run away from it anymore, and while it's at a lot of stages of everyone's journey, we want to sit in a position of like, I'm the victim and I was abandoned and it's your fault and you betrayed me. And while that was true, and I had to go through my victim moment of like, fuck you, this has been really hard and you did some really horrendous shit. There was like, once I overcame that victim part of the story, I was able to really sit with responsibility, of my part in the equation. And what I arrived at was, how was I ever able to have anyone permanent in my life? How was I ever able to expect that people weren't going to betray me or people weren't going to abandon me when that's literally what I was living every single day? I was constantly abandoning myself to show up in the way that, my partners wanted me to in relationship. That was a choice that I made. I was constantly betraying myself in every moment throughout the day to be a savior or to be more or to create more, So really what I had to work on in order to attract, something different, particularly in relationships, I really had to work on a solid relationship with self, and really understanding and uncovering, and this was my journey throughout the 2.5 years, really getting to know who I was authentically, so that any relationship that I was going to welcome into my life was based on them being able to see that and love that. And same within my business as well, if I was willing to abandon myself in the moments to change and transform myself to be something that another person expected me to be, that was never going to be sustainable. So in that 2.5 years, I really had to develop a deep sense of knowing and a deep solidarity and a foundation within myself that had me stop abandoning and betraying myself. So therefore I was able to attract something different from the outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So there's like this piece of like the dance between that trusting yourself and being the authentic part of yourself, where, you know, people say, oh, I'm already being authentic. How do we go beyond that? There's like so many people like even you, if we talked to you 2.5 years ago, we would have been like, okay, cool. Are you being authentic? And you would have said yes.
Yeah.
How do we go beyond that?
I feel like there's layers, you know, and I'll even probably look back on this conversation 2.5 years time and I'll go, oh my God, like I'm a completely different person to what I was back then. And so like, you know, we're ultimately doing the best with what we have available at the time. And to think that all of a sudden we're just going to wake up one day and we're completely authentic, you know, is very unreasonable. Like there's like the peeling of the onion layers, like peeling back the layers of our facade and our conditioning and the expectations of the world that I guess has to occur. So that's been my journey up until now and will be my journey continuing, you know? Yeah.
What about if you have clients in that position, though, you recognize that, you know, there are certain things which are playing out for them and they're in that place where they're putting on the facade, putting on the mask, rather than actually getting to what is really there?
I think that we've really got to address why it's there in the first place. You know, ultimately, when we're able to get to the core wound that has us feeling like we need to live this or show this protective layer to the world, that's ultimately just going to be a byproduct. You know, that layer is going to collapse as a result of resolving what's underneath, because ultimately that facade or that mask or that layer is only there as a protective mechanism, you know, to take us away from acknowledging a part of us that, you know, we deem as painful, you know, but the quicker that we're able to journey back to that little part of us that needs acknowledgement and healing and maybe a bit of tender love and care, it's just a natural byproduct that the facade will collapse.
How do you find, you know, when people come to you then for just strategy? So they come to you and they're like, oh, I just need a strategy to be able to grow my business. Like what do you see in that pattern?
I used to live in this pattern myself, so I see it so clearly. We want external fixes, you know, it's just like this avoidance strategy that we have. And it's easy for us to just be in the do, you know. I even had a conversation with one of my clients recently. You know, she's been with me for 3 months and she's created monumental success. And yes, there has been, I believe that there's got to be a balance. Yeah, sometimes it's a strategy problem, sometimes it's an emotional and energetic problem. And really my role is to intuitively know where we've got to go and to lead them there. And, you know, she said to me, look, like you've given me the most amazing strategy, but I feel like there's been so much emphasis on this relationship that's been in my life. And I'm like, yeah, but like the reason the strategy is not having, you know, the real, you know, full force momentum and results is because of this, you know. So I think that, you know, oftentimes people enter into my spaces as I assume, you know, they enter into yours based on what they want. However, if they knew what they needed to get there, they'd already be there. So it's my role to lead them there through what they need. You know, and I can only do that based on, you know, the journey that I've walked and the fire that I've walked through and, you know, embodying what I teach and what I guide people through. So yeah, it's our role of a leader. And sometimes like that ultimately requires so much courage, right? Because like you've really, in that moment, you've got to let the people pleaser collapse. Like you can't come forward and just give them what they want if you know it's not going to produce the result. You know, you've got to come forward and, you know, oftentimes hold a line and, you know, hold a standard or bring forth a hard truth that sometimes can be confronting and not necessarily what they want, because most people just want this like easy result, this easy solve, you know, and it's not oftentimes the case. Everyone's so nuanced. So that requires courage. Yeah.
So one of the common words that you keep using is nuance. How important is that?
Oh, so important. I believe particularly when it comes to coaching and mentoring, you know, like far out, there's not a one size fits all. And the reason that I work so closely with people is because the nuances have to be considered, you know, and there are a lot of people out there that are, you know, sharing this rinse and repeat process or this one size fits all model. It does not work. And in all of the 6 businesses that I've run, I can attest to that based on my experience. And one piece of feedback that I get from my clients, you know, on a really regular basis is you've literally helped me design a business model that is based on me, not on what works, but based on me. Because ultimately for something to work, yeah, okay, there's got to be some level of proven strategic components to it. However, there also has to be an energetic alignment to it as well. And if I give someone like a framework and tell them to go and do it and it feels hard and it feels rigid and it feels forceful and it feels out of alignment and it doesn't encompass who they are and their authentic nature and the way that they deeply desire to work, it's never going to have traction. So the nuances are everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that comes with, you know, deep levels of experience as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we see more and more business coaches and coaches coming into the industry every month, every week. There's another group of humans coming through.
Yeah.
And, you know, that nuance only really comes with like doing massive volume and repetition.
100%.
And, you know, you can't get that in a week-long course or a month-long course.
No.
What is your view on how the overarching kind of industry is maturing and growing at the moment?
Full transparency?
Yeah, full transparency.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm over it. Honestly, I'm tired of it. And although I eliminate myself from a lot of the noise, when you're a part of an industry, of course you're a part of it, you know? Honestly, I feel like there's a handful of people that are in this space for really genuine reasons. And of course, you know, this business for me has created a monumental amount of money, which is wonderful. But really at the essence of it, I'm here because I genuinely give a fuck. You know, like I really want people to win. And I feel like it has become an industry that is designed to help people. It has become an easy way to make money. And the human component of it has been lost. You know, the genuine care and consideration and intention has been lost because it's become saturated. And so, yeah, there's moments where I feel this deep level of like disappointment and grief because I just feel like there's so much emphasis on like bro marketing tactics and like, you know, all of these strategies that can have anyone win. It doesn't matter the service that you provide. You know, you got the right marketing in place. Yeah, you can create traction. It doesn't mean that your business is going to be sustainable, obviously. But, you know, in saying that, although there is the moments of disappointment and grief, there's also this knowing that at some stage the truth will be exposed. And I trust in that, you know. I trust that there will be a turnaround and the, you know, highlight reel of living this life as a coach will collapse eventually. You know, it has to. So, yeah, I hold on to the faith that the truth will be exposed and the people that are here for the right reasons will still be standing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've had many conversations with many people about it and, you know, even some ultra successful people that see coaching as just like a means to an end rather than actually being part of what they're actually here to create.
Yeah.
And, you know, in any maturing of any marketplace, there becomes more awareness around coaching and that means more people come into the industry as it grows up and eventually as it kind of peaks, then less people start coming into the industry because it becomes there's the new thing, which is kind of what we move into with like AI. So how do you see AI impacting the coaching industry and business?
I feel like it can impact in, you know, really positive ways. And, you know, I teach a lot of sort of strategies to utilize AI because, I mean, any new technology, you know, we can either turn a blind eye to it and, you know, not use it for its benefits or we can grab a hold of it and use it in the way that's really going to serve us. I don't know whether it can ever really completely and utterly replace the coaching industry. I mean, particularly maybe from a strategic perspective. However, from a healing perspective, like I would say 70% of the work that I do with my clients is internal. And I don't, like AI doesn't have an intuition. AI isn't, it doesn't have what's required to support someone through their own internal blockages and healing. I mean, it does to some extent. So I don't feel like it's ever going to entirely replace this industry. However, I do believe that it can be used to our benefit. You know, there's a whole lot more productivity that can be created, you know, with the use of AI. It means that we can show up a lot more in a lot more, you know, places, and we can be far more omnipresent. But ultimately, I know for me, and I don't know whether you experience the same thing, like people come into my spaces and they're like, no, I want access to you. You know, like people really are craving that human high-touch environment. There's plenty of stuff that I've got online that is like consume at your own pace and it's all evergreen. And people come into my spaces, they're like, no, I want to call with you. And AI can never affect that, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely plays out where, you know, some people come in for the content and other people just come in because they're like, oh, yeah, I want to be with the weird guy in a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the way that I operate, you know, like when I work with someone, I don't want to watch their videos. I want access to them because I want my questions answered really fast.
Yep.
You know, so yeah, that can never be taken away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely the thing. There's definitely the shift of the industry of, you know, there's a lot more people that want that high touch experience because they've been in containers, you know, with hundreds of other people in the past where they haven't even, like I've been in containers where I've had one interaction in 12 months with the person who actually is the face of the thing. It's like, well, you know, maybe getting some one-on-one attention is going to be more beneficial. And most people are yearning for that when they've gone to the guru coach and haven't gotten any attention from them and they haven't actually got some support because it's just a massive container. Then it has that swing of the pendulum where people come back and it's like, oh, I want one-on-one support with someone rather than just, you know, being part of a massive container.
Yep.
And, you know, the other end of that is, you know, there's a lot of people now also that are starting to want more self-paced content because they're like, I don't want to show up to calls where there's like group calls where there's people there that are, you know, I'm in line to get my question answered and stuff like that. I just want to be able to go straight to the thing so that I can get it instantaneously where I get the solution like that. And this is very much shifting of how people are seeing the marketplace as a whole and how they're buying things as well. It's an entirely different dynamic. There's like groups of people that are buying faster than ever, and then there's people that are still on that long kind of track where they're just like, right, well, you know, I want to do this in the future, and they're putting you on the vision board as well. What have you noticed in terms of the shifts in the marketplace of how people are buying?
Yeah, so I feel like there's there's a bit of balance. I believe in the past, like people have really just and here's the thing, it's once again so nuanced. You know, like it depends on the coach, it depends on the messaging of the coach, it depends on the ads of the coach or the content of the coach as to who you're attracting and what that particular person wants. You know, I tend to work with higher level entrepreneurs who are like me, who want their questions answered fast. Like they actually don't have time to sit and watch a video series. They don't want to figure things out on their own. They want like questions in the moment. They want access to me. So for me, because my sort of content, my marketing, my messaging has really shifted gears over the last, I would say, year and a half. I feel like there's a lot more people coming into my space that want that high touch. Like they want me. They want that more mentorship access. But, you know, then I can see as well, like there are a lot of my clients who are experiencing the exact opposite, you know, where there's a lot of people that are craving that sort of like lower ticket, you know, like just answers to their questions, you know, in the moment via a video. It also depends on price and willingness to invest as well. Because obviously, you know, I can't be in a one-on-one capacity with every person, you know, like that's not scalable whatsoever. So I think that, it depends on the person that you're attracting and the price they're willing to invest. So I feel like it's a hard, like overarching sort of answer that I can give because it depends on who you're wanting to attract and all the nuances of who you are as a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How important is kind of nailing your messaging? I see that it's something that you do very well.
Yeah, like so important. Literally one of the most important foundations of a business, because everything is built upon that. You know, like our content, our marketing, our ad copy, our email sequencing, our sales process. Like oftentimes people think that they've got a sales problem, and it's not actually a sales problem. They've just got a severely poor message that their business is built upon. You know, so our message determines who we are attracting. And so I believe a major factor to creating a really firm message is understanding firstly who we are and then secondly understanding who it is that we want to work with, and not work with because, oh, great, you know, I can make a sale, you know, or who would I be happy with, you know, in the short term. Like ultimately, who do I want to be prioritizing my time and energy with every single day in the most, like, taking money out of the equation. Yeah. And I really had to sit with that, you know, for a long period of time. And there's been refinements, you know, that I've made in the process of that. But that then, you know, once we're able to identify that client, we really have to sit with, right, what problems are they experiencing and what do they desire to experience? Like if we can really get into the nuances of their psychology in the micro moments, we're able to create such a firm part of our business that then content becomes easy. You know, ads become easy. There's a lot of people and even people that come to work with me and they're running ads and they're not, you know, getting leads, like qualified leads from those ads. And it's got nothing to do with the way that the ads are set up. It's because they don't have a message. Like it's vague and it's speaking to everyone. Social media is noisy. And particularly the coaching industry is noisy. What used to work doesn't work. Like, you know, running these 5-day free challenges and like those challenge models, they don't work anymore. I mean, they do to some extent, and it depends, you know, how good you are at marketing and content and messaging. However, like there is a pivot that is required right now. And I believe that in order for us to penetrate through the noise of social media and our industry, we have to be so dialed in and refined, you know, with the messaging that we have, the problems that we are solving, the outcomes that we are providing, the solution that we're giving people. Because ultimately people aren't going to pay attention otherwise. You know, they're going to get caught in that scroll hole unless we capture their attention with something that so deeply relates to them. You know, a feedback that I get on a really regular basis is, oh my God, this piece of content was literally speaking to exactly what I'm experiencing. And the only reason is I know myself and I know my journey that I've traveled and I experienced that at some stage of my journey. And I know exactly who I am speaking to in the social media world. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
How do you facilitate people through going from vague marketing to that specific nuanced marketing? Like a lot of people are like, oh, but you know, I want to serve everyone.
Yeah, I relate. You know, the truth is I can serve everyone, you know, but it's like when I'm trying to serve everyone, I'm serving no one, you know? You know, one first thing that I do, and obviously it depends on how I'm working with a client, but if I'm working with them, let's just use the example of more of a high touch space. I extract their genius. So I find that a lot of people do a whole lot of things that they're not even aware that they're doing. And I believe that what creates another really important foundation in a business is extracting their genius to create some sort of mechanism that they can build upon. And so I'll walk them through, okay, so in this one-on-one call that you're doing, where do you start? And then what? And then what? And then what? And then we're able to like take what they do and look at it from a different perspective because they're not even realizing that they're doing it. It's just becoming it's so innate for them. And then we're able to almost create like this methodology or this mechanism that is true to them. And that can be used in a micro format or a macro format. That can be repurposed into multiple different offerings. But we've got kind of like this roadmap of what they do. And then we've got to look at, okay, so who is that applicable to? And ultimately, not only who is that applicable to, but who do you desire to work with? Because I believe that most of the time, people that are sitting in this place of, I can work with anyone, they're only doing that because they're actually sitting in a whole lot of scarcity. It's like, I'm just going to throw out this big wide net and I'm going to hope for the best. And in order for us to become really dialed in with our messaging, it's like we have to step into this place of like no longer being in scarcity. It's like I'm gonna throw out a really precise net, and I'm only going to settle for the person that really lights me up. And so that's like the start point. Like we have to shift energetically as well. But then once we're able to identify who it is that we want to work with, like all of the thousands of people that I've worked with over the years, I can viscerally feel the difference between working with someone that's not the right fit and someone that is. And I'm sure you can relate to that, like who's not the right fit is someone that I've got to drag. I simply am at a stage where I refuse to do that. I don't want to be holding accountable. I want to work with the person that is willing to run beside me, not rely on me, not see me as some guru that beholds something that they don't. I want someone that is able to meet me in their power and to come to me for with the questions that they have or the solutions that they require, and we're able to implement at lightning speed and move. And so that viscerally feels so different in my body. And as a result of working with both people, I'm able to really specifically identify what problems this person is experiencing, because I was probably experiencing those problems at one stage of my journey. I'm also able to delve into and identify what they're desiring to experience. And so that's the start point, extracting the genius, being able to create like a roadmap of what we can bring to the world, asking who is the right fit for this, but then who do we desire to work with, and then really delving into the deepest understanding of who that is. And then our content is an extension of that. Our ads are an extension of that. Our masterclasses are an extension of that. Our low ticket offerings, our high ticket offerings, whatever it is that we're producing is based on this foundation that we have created. It's then effortless. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Love that. If someone was coming to you, like in beginning to kind of wrap up, if someone was coming to you and they were looking at stepping into doing something they've never done before, and they were stepping into being courageous in that, what would you say to them?
Just leap. I feel like, I guess give me more context.
The thing when we're most afraid when we're facing off with something that we've never done before, when we're stepping into like the unknown, when we're blazing our own trail, when we're doing each of those things. And, if I look back through all of my high level clients, it's they're coming to me and they're looking at doing something that they've never done before, or something that's never been done by anyone else before. And they're looking at creating that thing, and they're stepping into that unknown. Eventually it becomes their new normal, but that first time that they actually do it into that new level, that new revenue bracket, creating a certification, selling from stage, whatever it is.
There's friction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's facing off with that? They recognize that they're here for something bigger, and they recognize what that thing is, but they haven't taken that first step and they're facing off with that right now. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I've said on a really regular basis to a lot of my clients, resistance is the compass. Like resistance shows us that we're headed in the right direction, because on the other side of resistance is a bigger, bolder, braver version of who we are. And so my advice to anyone in that is just meet the resistance and keep meeting it until it becomes effortless, because there was nothing ever created in the world by following someone else's model. It was only created by people that are willing to blaze a trail and innovate and do the hard thing to meet the resistance and take the bold move. So I feel like it's as simple as that. Just face the resistance. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to be able to get in contact with you? Socials,
Krista Tier on all social media channels. It's me in my messages as well. It's not a random bot, so you're welcome to reach out.
It's a funny time we live in where we have to tell people that.
I know, right? I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, brother.